Thanks for coming today. Are you familiar with the 5 love languages for your marriage book?
No.
Okay. So this is all going to be new for you. Gary Chapman wrote 5 love languages, The Secret to Love That Lasts, and it's for married couples. And he also then years later wrote the 5 love languages of children. I know personally my husband and I really benefited from his first book, and so when someone suggested this, I was like, oh, that's a fantastic idea. So love languages, the idea is that they're the way that you receive and send love. So we each do it a little bit differently, and Dr. Chapman kind of identifies 5 primary ones. And just like, some of us are extroverts and some of us are introverts and some of us are extroverted introverts and introverted extroverts, and I didn't know that was such a thing. But just because you and your wife might have love languages, your children might have totally different ones. And that's just normal. That's just kind of how people are sometimes. So these are the 2 authors for this book. Gary Chapman partnered with Ross Campbell because of his psychiatric background with his focus in children and adolescents. He has this whole preface in the book about how he didn't feel like he was competent to do it without someone who had that background. So here's the general idea is that if you asked your kiddo, how do you know mommy or daddy loves you? Or if anyone asked your child that, then they would give you an explanation, right? So they might say, because he hugs me every night, or because he cooks my favorite meal, or because he buys me new toys. It can change, or it can vary from child to child. And those responses are kind of indicators of how your child is perceiving that you love them. And one of the things that the author suggests is if you think about your emotional need for love, or you think about like Maslow's hierarchy, like after you've got like food and water and basic survival, then the next thing is like love and acceptance, right? So if you think of like our need for love and support, it's kind of like a gas tank. So when your gas tank runs low, your car doesn't go. When your emotional tank, your love tank runs low, then that's when you'll often start to see a lot of behaviors, children just trying to find out, like, do you love me, trying to get that reassurance type of thing. So to that end, children act out for 2 main reasons, unmet emotional needs or unmet physical needs, right? They're hungry, they're tired, they're thirsty, and then they get fussy, or they just don't feel loved, they feel rejected, they feel unhappy. So children under the age of 5 require all 5 love languages to develop emotionally. And so it's kind of difficult to determine a child's primary love languages before that they are 5. And sometimes it can even be tricky up until around the age of like 8, 9. Just because they're still learning their own personality, they're still like learning about themselves. Something to really keep in mind as you consider children and how they require things, need things, how they act and how they don't act. Children are children, right? So they act like children. They childish behavior is not always very pleasant because it's childish. They haven't become adults. They don't have full capacity in their brains yet for reason and logic. As parents, part of our job is to love them despite their childish behavior so that they will mature and give up their childish ways as they grow. And if we only love them when they're good, they'll understand that love is conditional and they won't feel genuinely loved. And so this can make them feel insecure and prevent them from moving towards a self-controlled maturity and making, so that makes their development and their behavior our responsibilities as parents, because if their primary reasons they act out are unmet needs, physical or emotional, then we need to be making sure that we're meeting their needs to help them to control their own emotions, right? If they feel conditionally loved, they will stop trying to meet requirements for love because they might feel like they can't. So, and that can be as time goes on. When you're talking about your kids are younger, that's something that probably wouldn't manifest until they were tweens, teens. But feeling like they are conditionally loved can lead to insecurity, anger, anxiety, and low self-esteem. And then the last point to always remember when we start talking about children and how they act and how they send and receive love is that if you love them unconditionally, they will feel comfortable about themselves, and it will give them tools to control their anxiety and their behavior. I want to point out the last point on the slide. A lack of emotional development at an early age often leads to never fully developing emotionally. And I think we see that a lot in homes where children when children don't feel they feel loved, they don't get a lot of love at home, and then we'll see them as adults. If you look at criminals, let's take it the other way. If you look at adults who tend to have like criminal records, they will often talk about how they grew up in difficult homes and they didn't feel loved by their parents, right? So they often have a hard time expressing their own love, and dealing with their own emotions. So focusing on loving your child as a child reaps benefits in the long run. So the 5 main love languages, and this is true for adults and for kids: physical touch, words of affirmation, quality time, gifts, and acts of service. So physical touch, hugs, kisses, shoulder rubbing, hand holding. Words of affirmation, telling your child positive things like, I like this about you. I love that you share because you love your brother. Doesn't it make our world easier? Quality time, spending one-on-one time together that's distraction free. Gifts, these can be small gifts. I know, especially when my child was very little, I get lots of rocks and like picked dandelions and things because they like to give gifts. And acts of service, doing things for the other person. So we're going to go over each of the love languages and kind of talk about them a little bit more in depth. So some children, for physical touch, some children just want to be hugged. My husband and I call them snuggle bugs. I'm fairly certain that my son's primary love language is physical touch. Because every time we're sitting on the couch, we can be playing a game or doing a puzzle or whatever. He's like, Mom, I want to sit right next to you. And he sits right next to me. Yeah. So like we know that babies develop more healthierly. They'll fight diseases more readily, and they're more emotionally stable when they're held and just loved on and caressed. We kiss them. You can see that with preemie babies, and that's why the big skin to skin is such a thing. It's a big deal. Children love to be hugged, touch, and this will change as they get older, right? So like bigger kids, tweens, teens, they're not maybe going to want to hug you, but maybe they'll want a high five or a bear hug, or when they're in that older elementary school age, they'll want a rough house. Maybe your 5-year-old wants a rough house currently. So all of those things are physical touch. Words of affirmation. So just using words that are positive. So something that the book makes a big distinction on is affection versus praise. And praise is something that the child does, something they have control over. And then affectionate words are things they don't necessarily have control over. So you want to make sure that if you when you're giving your child words of affirmation, that your praise is always justified. So don't tell them, oh, good catch, when they kind of didn't really do a good catch, because they know that they didn't catch it well, and so eventually it'll start to feel like flattery, and then it'll just kind of feel empty. They probably wouldn't be able to articulate that, but they'll just be like, you say that about everything, So, and then it can turn into this kind of like, well, you say these things about me all the time, you're just lying, you just say these things to try to make me happy. So, but compliment good behaviors. So, like, I like how you showed kindness, I like how you didn't give up. So you don't have to necessarily praise the specific action that didn't do well, as long as they persisted in trying. Does that make sense? For children whose primary love language is words of affirmation, you want to be very careful to attach anything to the words I love you. I love you, will you please pick up your room? I love you, please go brush your hair. I love you, please, that kind of makes it conditional to where if you clean up your room, I will love you more. And you want to be very careful that you don't do that. A good example they had in the book was, you're strong, you should play football. So you're complimenting the child, but then you're telling them what they need to do with that. So, the downside to words of affirmation, downside? That's not the right word. The thing to be careful of with words of affirmation is words of confirmation. So, condemnation. So if your child clings to your positive words, you want to make sure that when you're upset with them, that you don't condemn them using their love language. So you wouldn't want to say, I can't believe any child of mine would do something like that. Like, no child of mine should do something like that. Well, then that makes them think that, am I your child? Yeah. So, yeah. Let's see. Quality time. So, one-on-one time with your parent, and so just like one parent and one child is kind of the goal. Quality conversations are really at the root of this love language. So it's not just like going to a movie, but it's also like it's talking about things together, and it might not start that way. It might not start as like talking about deeper things, but typically, as relationships form and grow and deepen, bigger, deeper things come out. You can use it, like you can, if you have chores to do, and you have and your child's love language is quality time, you can try and do those chores together. As children get older, it doesn't always translate as well to quality time when it's chores. It translates better when it's hobbies. So I would just put in a word of caution there. For younger children, playing together, coloring together, pretending together. If you went to a park with them, it would be actually playing, pushing them on the swing, and catching them at the bottom of the slide, as opposed to sitting on the park bench and watching. Meals together, good conversation. That's a really easy one for quality time. Gifts. So children whose love languages are gifts really just gravitate towards the things that you have. They might have a special place to display them, and they love to continuously give you things. Gifts is a tricky one because it can lend itself to materialism. And obviously that's frowned upon. Well, it's just really not fulfilling in a lot of ways. So if you can pair it with other love languages, such as like, for example, like I'm giving you this, like a coupon book, like a homemade coupon book. So the gift is the coupon book, but the coupon book can have like, a mom and dad, or a mom and son date, or a dad and daddy son date. fun special snack or things like that. So you can make it a gift without it being like a big thing. It doesn't need to be a big toy for it to be a gift. It can be personalizing a snack, making instead of just like grapes and bananas, like you could make the grapes and bananas into a face and be like, look what I made for you. Mm-hmm. So it's some of it is in the presentation of it. You know, a small treat in your child's lunchbox can work just as many wonders as Legos. And I think the big thing to remember is that a child whose love language is gifts often wants to know that you thought of them, mm-hmm. not so much that you spent money on them. So, yeah, I guess that's probably a good way to sum that up. Acts of service. So this can be tricky for us as parents because parenting is a 18-year act of service, sometimes longer. So it can be difficult for us to recognize it as your child receiving that act as love. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. But the children whose love language is acts of service, if you do small deliberate things, it can make a large difference in their life. I think the key here is that they need to see that you are happy to do it, that you see their needs and you try to meet that extra need. One of the big examples was a child who had lost like a library book, couldn't find it, and you know, she came home and her mom had found it and she had it on her spot at the table. And she had also had, like, I knew you loved apples. I went to the store today and I got you your favorite apples. That kind of thing, which kind of sounds like a gift, but I think it just goes into, like, I'm doing things for you that were often unprompted. Another example was, what's one of the best things that I can do to help you in the morning? You know, how can I help you? And, well, if all my things are put into my backpack, then I don't have to look for them. You know, and that was something that one of the examples that he gave that really helped a mom and daughter pair. Teaching children to serve others will have a lasting impact even if it is not their primary love language. So volunteering together is a great way to bond and to share experiences. Another point that they made in the book was do acts of service even when you don't feel like it. Don't make it conditional. So just because you make their child's bed every day and that child threw a fit that day, don't not make their bed because they threw a fit, because then it becomes a conditional love. Okay, so your child is under 9, which yours are. It can be tough to determine your child's love language. There were like 4 ways that you can do it. Observe how your child expresses love to you, and then how they express love to others. Listen to what your child requests most often. So does your child request, Mom, come play with me, Dad, come play with me, or do they request like, can you do these things for me, or tell me a story. One of my favorite, I'm pretty sure my daughter's love language is words of affirmation. Every night it's tell me a story, Mom, tell me a story. And it's always, she wants like a family story, right? Another thing you can do is ask, would you prefer questions? So younger kids, ages 5 and 6, the questions might look like, would you like me to make you cupcakes? An act of service. Or would you like to have lemonade together on the deck or outside? And that's quality time. So they're choosing, like, would you rather me do this for you, or would you rather do this for you? Would you rather wrestle, which is physical touch, or would you rather read a story together? While I'm out of town, would you rather I sent you a present, or would you rather me send you a special email? And you can kind of get a sense of how the child responds, how the child responds can kind of give you a sense of what they are preferring for their love language.
So is it, I'm sorry.
No, you're fine.
So is there possible that the child have like a different love language, not just one?
Yeah, so there you can have two. Usually you'll have a primary, and you can
Okay.
have like there can be a strong secondary.
Okay.
And it can change as they grow a little bit.
Mhm.
Like when I was first married, my primary love language was physical touch. So I really like to hold my husband's hand, and he's not a hand holder in public, which is fine. You know, we're all different. But it's shifted now as I've gotten older to quality time. So it can change and shift. But I think, especially because your kids are younger, something to remember is they might have one now, and it could very much change more quickly than that because they are so young. Especially your 2-year-old.
Yeah, like my 4 years old, she have like I don't know, like feel like she's all over this, like
Sure. Well, especially at the age of 4, they kind of need all
yeah, the
all
quality
the
time,
loves.
gift, yeah.
Yeah, and when they're very little, and then when they get older, there's kind of a neutral stage in there, but sometimes kids, and he talks about this in the book. This isn't just me. Sometimes kids can, like if they get the idea that you're asking, is your love language gifts, you know, that type of thing, then, and they have like that bent towards materialism, because some kids do, some kids just kind of do,
Yeah,
some kids don't. Anyway, we don't have to go into my family, but then they can kind of manipulate that into making it so that they get gifts, even if that's not their primary love language. So you just have to be careful, just kind of like know your kid, right? Anyway. I would say like the ultimate test, and for your kids are so young that I wouldn't necessarily try like the ultimate test that he talks about, which is 15 weeks of practice. So 2 weeks of each love language, like very intensely, like very focused on words of affirmation for 2 weeks and seeing how your child's behavior changes. And then you take a week off and kind of let it go, and then like 2 weeks of like acts of service or 2 weeks of quality time, and you take another, and see, just kind of take notes for that. When they're extremely young, like you said you have 2 and 5, right?
yes.
Yeah, so when they're that young, what I would say is, based on what he says in the book, is that they may not have a super primary love language yet, but it is probably like 1 or 2 are coming out stronger than the other ones. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, yeah. And when they get older, since they're recording, I'm going to go ahead and talk about the older kids too.
Okay.
If anyone out in cyber world has older kids and wants to know, choices at age 10, would you rather I fix a computer as an act of service or play basketball together, which is a quality time and physical touch kind of thing. And then, or you could ask, would you rather I watch your gymnastics practice or go buy you a pair of jeans? So would you rather I spend quality time with you or get a gift? At age 15, some of the choices might be, since we're the only ones here tonight, would you prefer that we go eat out together, which would be quality time, or that I fix your favorite meal, which would be acts of service? Another would you prefer question. I see you're discouraged. What would be more helpful? If I sat down and told you how much I love you and told you how wonderful you are, just words of affirmation, or if I gave you a bear hug and just told you, I'm with you, man, or I'm with you, girl, which is physical touch. Yeah. Do you have any other questions about like how to learn your kids' love language? So if your child is over the age of 9, they do have this love language quiz on 5lovelanguages.com, and the child can take one. so if you were having a little bit of trouble with the would you rather questions, you could do that. Before the age of 9, the kids can't always take the quiz themselves. I think it's a reading comprehension problem. So that's why they recommend at the age of 9 and up for the quiz online. Okay. So the last few chapters that are in the book, he talks about love languages and discipline, and learning with your love languages, and anger. So some important things to remember, that you always need a discipline in love. Discipline is not punishment. Most children misbehave because they have an unmet need, which is what we talked about at the beginning, either emotional or physical need. And in a child's mind, negative attention is better than no attention. So often you'll see a child acting out because they feel like they're not being paid attention to, so they just don't feel like they're loved, and so that's why they act out. When a child is very remorseful, one of the most powerful things you can do is forgive. And that doesn't mean that there are consequences, but here, I wrote in my notes to read this passage. So it says, Kevin broke the neighbor's window while playing baseball in the backyard. He knew it was against the rules to play baseball there. The park was a block away and the place to play ball. And on several occasions, the father and son had talked about the dangers of playing ball in the backyard. And when the neighbors saw Kevin hit the ball that broke the window, he called Dad to inform him. And when, so this is written from the dad's point of view. It says, after I got home, I calmly went to Kevin's room where he was working on his computer. I walked over to him and started rubbing his shoulders, and in a minute or so, he turned from the computer and gave me his attention. Stand up, I said, I want to hug you. I wrapped my arms around you and I said, I've got to do something really tough, and I want you to know that I love you more than anything. I kept hugging him for a long minute, and it felt good to be close. It says earlier, and I skipped it, it says Kevin's primary love language is physical touch. Mom called today to tell me what happened to Mr. Scott's window, and I know it was an accident, but you are well aware of the rules about not playing baseball in the yard. Therefore, I have to discipline you for breaking the rule, and it hurts me to do this, but it's for your good. No baseball for the next 2 weeks, and you must use your money to repair the Scott's windows, and we'll call the window company to find out how much it will cost. And then I hugged him again, and I know he felt my tears running down his neck, and I said, I love you, buddy. And he said, I love you too. So I think the idea that he's really trying to get at here is that don't discipline and don't use a love language against a child. Like if you know that their love language is physical touch, spankings can be like very traumatic for a child. Same, we talked about words of affirmation. Like then if you use those words against your child, not those words, but if you use words carelessly for a child who thrives on your words, then it can really cut deeply into them. If you know your child's love language is quality time, don't put them in isolation. Like don't send them to, their room to be away from everybody for the rest of the day. Like that can cut really deeply. I would. And then I think the other thing is the punishment needs to fit the crime, right? So Kevin is obviously an older kid, but he wasn't spanked or reprimanded or, the car wasn't taken away, but baseball was taken away because obviously he enjoys playing it, and he has to fix the wrong. So the consequence, the punishment was fixing the wrong. So anyway. All right, anger and love. So, when you think about how you express anger, and this one always like stabs me in the mama heart, right? When you think about how you express anger, the chances are that your children will learn to express anger in the same way that you express anger around them. And that always makes me mad, because I mad at myself, because I know that I don't always control my anger very well. There are 2 ways that we express anger, verbally and behaviorally, right? So we either start talking about it, or we start yelling about it, or maybe we throw things, maybe we like smack a table, or stomp out or slam doors. That would be behavior. So children are the same. Children are going to express their anger either verbally or behaviorally. So if a child can express their anger verbally, that is way better than behaviorally, right? So if we look at like our steps up our scale of, we don't have any of our brain poster. Oh, we do. So like our survival state, emotional state, and executive state. If we're going up up into our executive state, which is where we want to be, even if we're not acting out behaviorally and we're acting out verbally, that's way better than behaviorally, because behavior is in our survival state, and verbally is an emotional state. Now, if we can verbalize it in an executive state where we're not so emotional, that's the best. But for a child, they have to learn to get there, right? Mm-hmm. So often when children are able to express their anger verbally, we don't want to hear it, right? Because it's sassy and it's back talk and it's these things. And so one of the things that the authors very much say is if they can speak it, let them, because that's a step better than hitting or throwing a tantrum, punching their brother in the face. As you let them talk after they're done, usually, especially as they get older and they word vomit out their anger, then you can say, okay, please don't ever call your brother that again. That's very mean. Please don't ever call me that again. That's very mean. And then you can talk them through it. Remember, a escalated adult cannot de-escalate an escalated child. So if you remain calm, and this is something, I don't think I've seen you at our conscious discipline classes we had earlier this year. Yeah. No. If you can remain calm when that child is upset, that can help that child to download your calm. So if you can stay de-escalated, then you can help that child de-escalate. However, once you escalate, you got to get yourself down, and then you got to get a child down. And so it can get real difficult real quick. So the main point in the chapter that he has on anger and love is that he wants us as parents to work on how we handle our anger and to try to model better how to handle anger for our children, so that they, when they get older, they can handle it better than hopefully we do. Yeah. So, yeah. I think that is most of it. We are in the process of ordering books and audiobooks for a parent library, so parents can check out books like this. We have, as far as I know, we've submitted the order, so now it's just like in the system.